Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is a little different from the content I've been uploading lately, which has been more along the lines of vlogs or music. But a huge part of what I do and who I am is a teacher. I teach private piano. I have taught for years. I have been on the faculty of university pre-college departments and community schools of music and that sort of thing. So over the years, I've gotten a lot of questions from parents about the specifics of piano lessons, kind of what to expect, especially for those who are just starting a child out. They've never done a music lesson or a piano lesson ever. I hope to answer 10 of the most commonly asked questions I get as a piano teacher, and hopefully this is helpful for any parent who's looking to get a child started. I would like to note that although this might be applicable if you're an adult looking to get started, it's not really geared towards that. I approach adult lessons a little differently than I would, of course, beginners who are children starting out. So if there's interest in that, I can always make another video about the sorts of questions that my adult students usually have or come to me with even after they've started their lessons. So comment down below if that's something that you would be interested in. I always try to make my videos a little bit more concise, a little bit more brief, a little less of me rambling, but I usually end up having these 15-20 minute videos. So in this case, I have put timestamps down in the description. Maybe I'll also put them over here of the 10 different questions. So if you have a very specific question, feel free to just skip around in the video so that I actually get to your question and you don't have to, watch the entire thing through. With that being said, let's get into our first question. And that first question is, how long until my child is able to play the piano? This is probably the most common question I get from parents. And I would say that the answer depends on what your definition of playing the piano actually is. If you're talking about the physical motion of raising your fingers, playing those notes, knowing your notes, and maybe being able to play a few tunes, I would say, you could easily get there within 6 months if you're really dedicated. But it's kind of like that saying, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, but teach a man how to fish, and you feed him for a lifetime. At that stage, your child is being given a fish. So they'll be able to play the same few pieces again and again. Maybe they'll be able to pick up a small piece here and there, but they won't really be able to progress on their own in a significantly deep or meaningful way. And they won't continue to progress. You kind of hit that plateau when you haven't gotten over that hump of actually understanding the instrument, actually gaining some nuance and depth in it. It's not only a physical thing, but it is also a mental thing. Playing an instrument is both. So I would say that that 6-month hump is very difficult to get over for a lot of people, but you really should give the instrument a fighting chance and stick with it for a little bit longer if you are going to try and make it to a point where you can pick up any piece of music and be able to learn it and be able to play it decently. So for a lot of people, that can take years. For some of us, myself included, I've been playing the piano for 23 years at this point, and I still find that I have a lot to learn. I still approach the keyboard differently from day to day. So it really is as big of a process as you want it to be. Number 2, how long do lessons need to be for a beginner? I like to think of this in terms of learning a sport. There's a certain sense of physicality that has to come with it. There's a certain amount of body awareness and moving muscles that aren't used to moving in a certain way. And then once you have all of that, connecting that to the mental aspect of learning an instrument and being able to sort out commands and do what your ears and your mind and your eyes are telling your fingers to do. So actually at the beginning, longer lessons can actually turn out to be way more frustrating than they need to be, because if you're here for, say, an hour, you are getting way more commands than your muscles are able to handle. So instead, half-hour lessons are usually very good for a beginner because they break down those commands into manageable sized chunks that you can then practice at home. I tell my beginner students that ideally they come twice a week, if they can swing it, for half an hour each, with a couple days in between so that they're able to practice on their own. And that way, bad habits and mistakes don't start worming their way into your practice over the course of a week, because I, as an instructor, am able to kind of correct you if those things start to happen. Pragmatically speaking, if that's not an option for you, if you can't come twice a week, half an hour is fine too, especially at the beginning stages. A lot of that is just dedication on your part as a parent and your child's as a student to do that practice at home. If you're an older student starting out, I think that 45 minutes is also fine. Number 3 is, does my child need their own instrument? And my answer to this is absolutely 100% yes. You will need to get your child an instrument. Most of the work, like we've talked about at the very beginning, is physical. It's getting used to the instrument. It's getting used to moving your fingers in a certain way. And so if they don't have an instrument to practice on at home and they're just relying on their lessons, they're going 6 days without playing, without touching that instrument, and that doesn't bode well for continued progress. That being said, pianos are super expensive and it is a hefty investment. If you don't want to invest in an acoustic instrument here at the beginning before your child figures out whether or not this is for them, a keyboard is totally fine for a beginner. I would say you want to get at least the full set of 88 keys. Don't get one of those truncated versions that only gives you like 5 octaves. Do the full 88. Make sure that they're weighted so that they mimic the feel of a real piano, so that there's not that shock when they come into lessons and they suddenly can't play on an acoustic instrument because it's not as light of a touch as an electronic keyboard would be. And also make sure that your keyboard has a pedal extension. So it's a pedal board that you can just plug straight into your keyboard, and that way your child can start learning those left and right pedals. But once they start to advance to more complex repertoire that demands more nuance, more shading, more color, more of the fun stuff, you're really going to want to invest in an acoustic instrument, either an upright piano or a baby grand, or go for a grand. Once that happens though, you usually have a pretty good idea of whether or not your child's gonna quit after a year or whether they're in this for the long haul. How much should your child be practicing? Oh, this is a question that the teacher in me wants to answer with, every day, and I want to give you an exact formula for success that you can then impart on your child, but unfortunately, it depends. So for me, I always tell my students, consistency of quality is better than clocking a certain number of hours. You have to have this number of hours before you come into your lesson. Consistent practice of even just 10 minutes a day where you're really focused and you're really just going at it in a very deep and meaningful way and you're engaged is going to be way better than spending an hour drilling something that you don't really get. In my studio in particular, I give all of my students a practice schedule. So I actually break down every single day of practice between lessons and tell them, this is how much time you spend on this technique. This is how much time you spend on this piece. And those schedules get better over time because I'm able to kind of tailor them to what your child likes to do, what your child is maybe a little bit more weak on, as well as, hey, this week you've got a soccer game. This week I know you're not going to be able to practice as much. So it's really great in that I'm able to tailor those schedules to each individual instead of giving you, like a set formula that might not work for you. It's all about that flexible planning. And also this way, your child is never confused as to what to practice that day. They have a step-by-step guide as to what is expected of them, what they need to do that will give them their best shot at learning this instrument. I think we're on number 5. How young is too young? This is probably the second most asked question, especially for parents who have very, very small children who want them to start some sort of musical training, but have no idea if they can even sit still for that long. I would say a general rule of thumb, and of course exceptions will always be the case, but generally, if your child is able to recite their numbers, recite the alphabet, they can start piano lessons. And the reason I say that is because so many concepts in music use those two things. Note names are modeled after the alphabet. Rhythm and numbering your fingers, you need to know your numbers for that. So that usually puts that age at about 5 or 6, give or take a little bit, depending on your individual child. If your child is younger than this. They're 3 or 4, but you know, they show an inclination towards music. They bop around when music is playing and you're really excited and you want to get them into it. There are a lot of group classes that do a lot of rhythm and melody play in a fun and engaging environment that kind of plays off of activity rather than having them sit still at an instrument for a set amount of time. And that's a really great way of introducing things like pitch or singing or starting that aural training for children in a really fun way. So I would look into that option if your child really is very young and you don't quite think that they're ready to do one-on-one lessons just yet. So number 6 pertains to my studio in particular, where I strongly recommend that my students do recitals. The reason being, recitals are a key opportunity for a child to grow their confidence in performing under pressure, and also a way for them to see that it is not the worst thing in the world, that nothing bad is going to happen to you when you share your music with family and friends. It's not something that is best kept to oneself. It is best when it is shared, and that is a lesson best learned early. Children have a lot less inhibitions than adults do, and I think that recitals are a really good opportunity to reinforce that and not make it a scary experience, but make it an experience where you're supporting other people in your studio. You're learning new music through hearing your peers play. Recitals also give you a tangible thing to work towards throughout the year, so you know you have a goal. You know that you are doing this for something that has an end date. It doesn't feel like it's going on forever, and it lights a little bit of a fire underneath some children as they know that, okay, at the end of these 6 months, I'm gonna have to play these 2 pieces in front of my family and friends. Number 7 is, what sort of music will my child be learning? So I mainly teach in the classical tradition, whether that is technique or repertoire. I think that it is both the most varied canvas on which to learn this instrument as you explore different styles of touch, different sorts of techniques, and all of that. It also gives you the most diverse toolkit so that you are best prepared to handle whatever music comes your way, whether it's classical or not. That being said, I really enjoy when my students tell me, you know, I want to pursue some musical theater, or I want to pursue some pop or composition or songwriting. I think that that's a very integral part of what it means to be a musician, that flexibility, backed up by legitimate technique and legitimate skill. So I try to work that into their lessons, especially if they express an interest, and make it engaging, make it fun while advancing their ability to play. Pop music in particular, I think, is super overlooked as a tool for learning how to compose, how to songwrite. These things are things that are very relevant in young people's lives, and I think that the ability to create, to generate music instead of just regenerate music, is very important for any sort of instrumental lesson. Or almost there, we're at number 8, which is, what do I have to do as a parent? I welcome parents to sit in on lessons. Some of those parents record them and view the recording back at home as kind of a reminder of what to do in their daily practice with their children. Some parents come in and take longhand notes. The support that a parent can give in any sort of activity for a child cannot be overappreciated or overemphasized. Especially in those beginning stages, you being there in the audience at their first recital, or you consistently setting aside time to hear them practice or hear them play, is going to mean the world to your child. Unfortunately, I only see your child once a week or maybe twice a week, but you see them every single day, and you're able to take on that role of, okay, we're gonna set aside 10 minutes today to practice. We're gonna set aside half an hour today to practice. Let me hear what you've done. And making sure that they're responsible. They bring all of their stuff to their lessons, all of their books, all of their materials, and they're ready, they're confident, and they can come in. We can get started and we can continue to work on these concepts. Number 9 is piano a good starter instrument? So an instrument from which you can then springboard into other instruments. And I would say that piano definitely is a good instrument for the foundations of music, it's true. You have everything laid out linearly. You have a very large range from very low to very high, and you're able to see everything from a bird's eye view. So from that aspect, I think that yes, it is a very good starter instrument. It's also one of the few instruments that you can do both accompaniment and melody on. So you can play chords at the same time as playing a melody. I would say that piano is very uniquely situated because of all of those things. So yes, it is a good point from which to start your music journey and then go on to other things if you want. But I would also say that because of everything I just said, it is also a really robust and wonderful instrument in its own right. And if you give it a fighting chance, it might surprise you. Your child might end up really, really liking it. So I would say try and stick with it for a little while, give it a chance, and see if the piano isn't something that your child would be interested in sticking with. Okay, we are at the end. Number 10 is, what should I look for in a piano teacher? I know a lot of parents will go with the cheaper option or the cheapest option because, you know, their kids are just starting out, they're beginners, and they don't even know if their kids will stick with it or if this is kind of a one season, one and done sort of deal. I would say to that, you don't want to get into a situation where it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You go with maybe a less experienced teacher and your child is therefore not engaged and not having fun and not progressing as much as they wanted to, and then lose interest and drop out because those lessons are just not proving to do what your child wants them to do, which is to improve them. So I would say look for that middle ground where you are comfortable with what you're paying for, but that teacher is genuinely engaged with your child and they're invested in your child's education. And on the flip side of that, if your child doesn't quit and decides that this is something that they really want to do and they want to continue forward, sooner or later you're going to have to kind of level up that instruction, at which point it becomes kind of a struggle because that new teacher is going to have to rebuild your child's technique more often than not. I have had so many students come to me and I've had to move them back to basics and restructure their entire process of hand position and body position and how they're using their strength so that they're not straining the wrong things. Because piano is one of the more strenuous instruments, there's a lot that can go wrong in terms of positioning and pain. A lot of people get tendonitis. A lot of people have stress injuries from repeated motions. It's not good for the body if you build those bad habits in at the very beginning, and it's very difficult to go back and erase it. On top of that, it is very frustrating for a child who believes that they are at a certain level and who musically have advanced to a certain level to then be told they kind of have to scale back and they have to go back to really basic beginner stuff, and they don't get to play the fun, engaging, beautiful things that they've gotten used to playing because of a technique problem, because of a bad posture problem. So that is one of the most discouraging things you can do, is kind of move them back to drilling when musically they have matured to the point where they just want to be playing and growing and learning in that way. So generally, I would say look for a teacher who has some sort of degree in music, whether it is in actual piano performance or a higher education degree in music ed. I think that those are usually pretty good options. And don't hesitate to ask for a trial lesson before you commit to anything. I know a lot of music teachers, even if they don't advertise it, they will be willing to give some sort of short trial lesson to get to know your child, to see if you mesh. And that's the great thing about private lessons in relations to maybe like a school of music that doesn't offer a trial period. You get to have that flexibility with your one-on-one teacher. So those are the top 10 questions I get asked as a piano teacher. Of course, I am answering them from my personal experience and my point of view. I will absolutely say right now that I cannot speak for everybody. I do not speak for everybody, but I do hope that they were helpful. If you are looking for someone for your child, I understand that sometimes it's an overwhelming decision. Every child is different and every teacher is different. And so the way that we approach individual students has to be very flexible. You will notice that a lot of my answers are some fancy form of it depends. And it really does. It depends on your child. It depends on our chemistry. It depends on how much time they're willing to also put into it and how much they're willing to invest of themselves. If I didn't answer a question that you have, please comment below and I will get to it. If you're interested in taking lessons with me, please visit my website, which is tracywongpiano.com/lessons. I also have a lot of my music and philosophy up on that. Shoot me an email. I'd love to connect. In today's era of online lessons, it's easier than ever. And one of the advantages is I can teach from anywhere. You can learn from anywhere. Your teacher could live halfway across the world if you wanted to. So that's a really, really great part of what technology has brought into the music world. As always, please subscribe to this channel if you like what you see. It would mean the world, and it really does help support the growth of this channel. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your support, and I will be back with a new video very soon. Bye.